Any questions? Yeah, sure.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you for that presentation. It was very insightful. My name is Meher. I'm a public health researcher. I have a couple of questions related to the presentation. One would be, could you comment or share your thoughts on the sense of self or identity of the workers? What did they think of themselves as informal women workers? And the second is, to what extent was there collectivization or platforms for women to come together to share their thoughts, their anxieties, their happiness with each other? So if that forms a platform or a space for them to come together, collectivize, and also support each other through struggles and through good times. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, those were two great questions. About the sense of self as worker, we found that the unions actually had a lot to do with that, and some told us that after they had become union members, they had gained in self-confidence, in assertiveness. So within the factory, they were actually able to assert their rights vis-a-vis particular, abusive managers. However, this, briefly to answer both your questions, this did not translate into collective or group assertion of rights. And as far as collective organization of the workers is concerned, I would say that, as I said, it's very difficult to organize these workers. But in terms of the workers having interchanges with others or a sense of community, perhaps the greatest contribution has come from organizations like GLUE, like Munade, like FEDINA, etc., who have been able to bring the workers together under one umbrella and raise awareness about issues not necessarily related to work and wages, but about the commonalities that define their lives.
Thank you, Dr. Supriya. Yeah, it's a lot to take in probably from distressing numbers to stories, but worry not, there are a lot of QR codes kept there. You can scan them and feel free to download the report and read, share it, discuss it. Yeah. It's such a richly layered report with a lot of nuances. We thought of having a larger conversation today, right after the findings presentation, and that is the panel discussion titled Women and Work, Why Labor and Women's Movements Must Come Together More. So I invite all the panelists to come onto the stage. A little bit about the discussion itself. Why we thought of having this discussion at this point. It's clearly taking off from the report findings at the workplace, across formal and informal sectors. We see multiple concerns: poor wages, long and intense hours of work, insecure and precarious working conditions, occupational health and safety concerns, lack of reproductive rights, violence and harassment, subcontracting, migration, and the role of the state in regulating working conditions. All of this create multiple stressors under which social reproduction takes place. That's what Supriya ma'am very eloquently put it. Women's labor, body, and time absorb these stressors, thus intensifying their experience of time poverty and leaving them physically and mentally depleted. So when we speak of women and the worlds of labor, is it important for women's groups and organized labor to come together more? What are the connections between women's movement and labor movement? How can these movements respond to the everyday experience of women who combine long working and care hours? This is a conversation that we are hoping to have here. And I would briefly introduce our panelists. Rukmini Sen is a professor of sociology and the dean of the School of Heritage Research and Management at Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University, New Delhi. She researches the intersections of sociology, law, gender, kinship, and culture. She was a member of the National Human Rights Commission's core group on women and is a recipient of Wiscom's Sahas Award. I welcome you, Rukmini ma'am. Madhu Bhushan is an independent activist, researcher, and occasional filmmaker. Madhu is closely associated with SIEDS and its gender initiative, Gamana, Mahila, Samuha, a feminist collective. She also collaborates with various networks and organizations advocating for human rights and social justice, including the rights of sex workers, trans communities, and Adivasis. Glad to have you here, Madhu ma'am. The third panelist, Dr. Neethi P., has a doctorate in economics from JNU and is now a senior researcher at the Indian Institute for Human Settlements, Bangalore. Neethi's work focuses on urban formality, women's work, and alternative labor movements. She is an advisory member of the Karnataka Labor Policy Committee. Welcome to you, Neethi. And this discussion will be moderated by Indrani Mazumdar, whose work has influenced many in the field of gender and labor rights. Indrani is a prominent researcher and writer focusing on gender, labor, and women's work in India. She's contributed extensively to the discourse on women's labor migration and gendered employment crisis. She was a senior research fellow at the Center for Women's Development Studies, New Delhi. Please give a warm welcome to our panelists. Yes, please.
Well, we don't have a we don't have a lot of time for this discussion, but it is a very important discussion, and so I'm very grateful to Cividep and for organizing this particular panel. The question of the link between the women's movement and the labor movement should, for our generation, was almost given. And we understood, many of you would know that what is today known as the International Women's Day was actually initially International Working Women's Day. And there was the link between the struggle of the working class and labor movements for building a new society, and particularly attached to socialism, was linked to the women's question and to the women's movement in that period. And it has since sustained in a certain way and moved in a different direction at the same time. Now, in India, the very process of formation of the working class moved along a different trajectory. Supriya referred to it somewhat in her presentation, because whether under colonialism or in the post-independent period, the formation of the working class, an industrial working class, which was not just urban, but it was a working class, was always constrained by the fact that it never was sundered from the agrarian base on which it grew. And this affects gender relations to a great extent. The question of caste, the question of the pullback, and as even today, as you realize, that question of the fact that that very agrarian, poverty-stricken economy is still providing an element in the social reproduction of the capitalist mode of production in India today. So sometimes when we discuss the question of social reproduction, it is limited. But the fact is that in India, the working class and the worker, male or female, a part of the cost of social reproduction of that class itself is borne by the village economy even today. And so, therefore, the question of how gender relations are organized and situated within this class economy is far more complex than looking at just a few kind of direct experiences. And I just wanted to raise this question because we are going to be confronted with this. As of now, the study report has highlighted the brutalization of the urban experience, which has resulted in the particular forms of violence. There are questions in my mind as to whether this violence is experienced more by the woman worker than the one who is not bringing in income into the household. This may be also a feature. The question is, what is the non-worker woman? Is she a member of the same community? Is that community to be extended also? So the question of the relationship between the women's movement and the working class movement and the labor movement is a very complex question which has to be addressed at several fronts, I think. I mean, I'm sure our panelists will be enriching the discussion considerably on this. But there's just one point I would like to mention, and that is the question of this division between the trade union as based in the workplace and the women's organization as being based in the residential area. That's the natural structure. Membership of any mass women's organization is built up from the unit committee, which is in residential area based. And as I'm sure everybody knows. Whereas the trade union is workplace-based. Now, there's always a tension. There's a tension within the trade union, whether you're going to be factory-based, whether you're going to be area-based, whether you're going to incorporate the residential. These are all matters of discussion within the labor movement itself. Similarly, as far as the women's organizations are concerned, are we going to exclude the working women who are not there in the residences during the day when the women's organizations' membership activities take place? These are complex organizational questions. So far, unities have been largely at the formalist level. For it to become more requires a major cultural kind of movement, and in which both ideology will have to play a role. Without that, I doubt very much that you can build something. Why should people come to you? Why should they do it? Otherwise, you'll have some cases, you'll have some legal interventions, but the kind of thing that will drive a community into, well, they have to have a vision. That is what I just, and I think earlier socialism did provide the vision, and now people are a little struggling to find a way. So let me end my few opening remarks on this. And our first speaker, panelist today is Rukmini, and our organizers, very hard taskmasters, have been very, focused on what they want people to want something out of this panel discussion, I think. So in Rukmini, the question that they would really like to ask you about is, how are women's issues and labor issues conceptually connected? And if you could begin and speak a little more on the history of the movements. Teacher.
Sorry for that. Thank you very much to everybody in Cividep for organizing this and having me here.
It's not on.